Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Premier Gallant and I just finished a very great meeting, and I appreciate this opportunity to share a few details with you. I'm going to get things rolling, then Premier Gallant will share some of his thoughts, and then we'll wrap up things by opening the floor to your questions. So first and foremost, it is a great pleasure to be able to welcome Premier Gallant to Alberta. And I note that we held our meeting on the traditional lands of the Treaty 6 First Nations. Premier Gallant has been a solid ally, and I certainly appreciate the support that he has shown for the Energy East pipeline project. We agree the Energy East pipeline is in the best interest of all Canadians because it's the safest and most economical method to move oil and gas to market, and because it would create more jobs and refining in Canada. We also agreed developing energy resources and protecting the environment must go hand in hand. One cannot exist without the other. And that philosophy will underscore our work together as we implement the Canadian Energy Strategy, which was adopted by all Canadian premiers in July. The strategy enables government right across the country to align our work as we develop Canada's energy resources and energy potential in environmentally responsible and sustainable ways. Now, I'm pleased to note the strategy also gives Alberta and New Brunswick further opportunity to work closely together as we reinforce the need for new energy infrastructure and new energy markets. Of course, closely related to all of this is the subject of climate change, which we spoke about at length. Albertans have been clear it's time to take action on climate change, not just because it's the right thing to do, but to make sure the action we take is right for Alberta. Our government is looking forward to taking an active role in the discussions at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris this December. Our climate leadership panel is currently finalizing its advice, which will help inform our strategy going forward. Premier Gallant and I also enjoyed a good discussion about the federal election. And as you know, I'm already on record as saying I'm looking forward to working with Prime Minister Trudeau to build a strong Alberta within a strong Canada. And I'm pretty sure that I'm not letting the cat out of the bag when I say Premier Gallant is also rather optimistic. But maybe I'll let him fill you in on that subject as well as the others we discussed this morning. So over to you, Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Premier Notley. Trade between Alberta and New Brunswick amounts to approximately $2 billion. It's incredibly important for our two provinces to continue to build on what I think is a very strong relationship. C'est très important de travailler avec les autres premiers ministres autour du pays et bien sûr le Premier ministre du Canada si nous sommes pour surmonter les défis devant nous comme Canadiens et Canadiennes et si nous sommes pour créer des emplois et de l'opportunité pour les gens de nos provinces respectives. I'm very happy to be here, obviously working hard to build on a relationship that I think is very fruitful for both provinces and of course for the country. I know what many are thinking. Obviously a lot of the trade has to do with energy, there's no doubt about it, but there are many other industries as well that benefit from a strong economic relationship between Alberta and New Brunswick, whether it's financial, back office, or professional services. And I know what you're also thinking, is it only one way? It's not. In fact, $86 million worth of food that is produced in Alberta is bought by New Brunswickers. So for us, it's important to continue to build on that relationship and find ways that we can cooperate, collaborate to overcome some of the mutual challenges that we have and, of course, seize some of the mutual opportunities before us. There's no doubt that energy is something that is top of mind for both our provinces. For us in New Brunswick, the energy sector plays a huge role in our economy. We have many projects on the horizon that we believe will help us with our priority of creating jobs and economic opportunity in New Brunswick. One of those projects, of course, is the Energy East pipeline. We are big supporters of the project. We believe it's going to help us stimulate the economy in the short term with an important infrastructure investment for the country. It will help us ensure that an industry that's very important to the whole economy, the whole Canadian economy, is able to continue to grow. And it will be important for us as a country to diversify our export markets in energy. We believe in New Brunswick we have a lot to offer. We have the largest, most sophisticated oil refinery in the country. We have a phenomenal port in the Port of St. John. We have important pieces of infrastructure that can help us export new Canadian products in a competitive fashion to emerging markets. And of course, we have wonderful people that really do offer a skilled workforce to the Canadian economy. Alors, nous sommes très fiers d'être ici. Nous sommes très fiers de continuer à collaborer ensemble. And we know that whether it's on energy projects, whether it's on ensuring that there's labor mobility within our country, whether it's on combating climate change together, the more that we can build on our relationship, the better off the people of both our provinces are going to be, and better off all Canadians will be as well. Alors, ça me fera plaisir de prendre des questions.
So if you guys
Premier
could,
Gallant, I'm wondering about the Energy East pipeline you were talking about. In terms of obstacles going forward, there's a change in the federal government. What is your biggest, I guess, challenge right now between both you and Premier Notley, who both are very strong proponents of the project?
Well, this is a very complex project. It goes through many provinces, many communities, as we all know. This is an important project that we have to discuss with a few values at the forefront. First off, we want to focus on creating jobs and economic growth in Canada. I think if we see where the Canadian economy is at the moment, that's the priority for Canadians. Therefore, this project would help us do that in the short term and ensure that we have the infrastructure in the long term to be prosperous as a country. We also have to have a large conversation, an important conversation regarding climate change. And this is important to do at the same time. We have to show Canadians and we have to show the international community that as a country we are going to play our part to combat climate change. So I very much believe that the new federal government is going to be able to help us do that. They're going to be able to show the country and the international community that we are going to step up as a nation, play our part to ensure that we are combating climate change together. And I believe that will give us the brand, that will give us the credibility as a nation to develop our natural resources and energy projects. So I'm very hopeful with the partnership between Premier Notley and myself, with the partnership that we and all premiers hope to build with the federal government, we're going to be able to develop important projects like the Energy East pipeline.
Do you think then it's more likely to get the pipeline built is now the change in government in Alberta? Looking back at the PC government, did their record on climate change, was that an impediment to getting pipelines built? And if so, what difference will it make having the NDP?
Well, I think it's important to note that, like I just explained, that we have to have a brand, we have to have the credibility with the international community and with Canadians that we care about climate change. And that's the only way that they'll trust us as political leaders and as a country to develop our natural resources and energy projects. There's no doubt that Premier Notley brings that to the table. It's very clear that she supports the Energy East pipeline. She wants to see the jobs created. She wants to see economic growth for her province and the whole country. And at the same time, she's been very clear that climate change is important for us to work together on. And again, during our meeting today, she reiterated the role that she hopes to play in ensuring that as a country we can combat climate change together. I would say the same thing for the federal government in terms of the change that we saw with the last general election. Under the Harper government, no pipelines for oil were built. And I believe that one of the reasons for that is because the international community and even Canadians did not feel like the Harper government was doing enough when it came to protecting the environment and combating climate change. So I'm very hopeful and that with the Trudeau government that we're going to be able to build that brand internationally and gain the trust of Canadians that we can develop our natural resources and energy projects in a responsible and sustainable way.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, pour reprendre ce que mon confrère vient de vous demander, pourquoi est-ce que vous pensez qu'avec un gouvernement néo-démocrate à Edmonton qui parle beaucoup des changements climatiques, de la lutte contre les changements climatiques, avec l'arrivée de Justin Trudeau à Ottawa, pourquoi pensez-vous qu'Énergie Est est plus possible maintenant que, disons, il y a 2 ans?
C'est très important si nous sommes pour développer nos ressources naturelles et projets énergétiques que les Canadiens et Canadiennes et que la communauté internationale voient que le Canada fait ce qu'il peut pour combattre le changement climatique. Alors nous avons un rôle à jouer pour démontrer que nous sommes crédibles lorsque ça vient à protéger l'environnement et jouer notre rôle au niveau international et bien sûr à l'intérieur de notre pays. Alors moi je pense que Première ministre Notley, Premier ministre désigné Trudeau seront capables de démontrer aux Canadiens et Canadiennes et à la communauté internationale que nous sommes en train de travailler ensemble pour jouer notre rôle pour combattre le changement climatique. Et cela, j'espère, va nous donner la crédibilité pour avancer et développer nos ressources naturelles et nos projets énergétiques de façon responsable. Je pense que le gouvernement Harper, lorsqu'on garde le record, ils n'ont pas pu développer des oléoducs autour du pays. Et je pense que c'est en raison du fait que la communauté internationale, même les Canadiens et Canadiennes, ne pensaient pas que l'environnement sera protégé assez sous leur règne. Alors, je suis optimiste qu'avec le gouvernement Trudeau, que les Canadiens et Canadiennes, et bien sûr la communauté internationale va voir que nous prenons notre rôle à combattre le changement climatique au sérieux et que nous allons développer nos ressources et projets énergétiques de façon responsable.
Premier Gallant, the Potash Corp has announced that it's going to shutter one of its mines. I think it's near Sussex, is that right? What do you think about that? Do you have any concerns about that?
Well, we're always concerned to see any job losses in New Brunswick. I want to point out, though, that this has been planned for quite some time. This is something that we were expecting. It doesn't make it easier for the people and the families affected, but certainly something that we knew was coming as a province. All of the permanent employees are going to be continuing, going to the Piccadilly facility. There are some contractors, unfortunately, that would be losing work, but that's just a reminder to myself and to our government why we have to focus on creating jobs, why we have to focus on developing our natural resources and energy projects, why we have to ensure that projects like the Energy East pipeline make its way from Alberta to New Brunswick. So we're going to work incredibly hard day after day to ensure that there's opportunity for New Brunswickers to work, live and play in our beautiful province.
Premier Gallant,
How are we
are
going
you
to
going
do
on a
that?
tour right now,
We'll go
sir?
Graham, Josh, Tom, and then we're gonna go to the
Quick
phones.
question, Premier Gallant. Are you doing a tour of the provinces right now? I think you were in Vancouver on Monday, I believe. Are you going across the country? What's going on?
Yeah, well, to be completely frank, it all started with a wonderful invitation to speak at the Banff Forum that just happened this past weekend. It was a wonderful event with young people across the country from coast to coast to coast, talking about our country, talking about world issues. So I was very humbled and pleased to be asked to speak. After that, we figured it would be great, since we were out here, to build a tour of the western provinces. So we found ourselves going to Vancouver. I met with Premier Clark and had great discussions there. Obviously, I was in Calgary yesterday and today here in Edmonton, and I'll also be going to Regina tomorrow. So this is, I thought, a great opportunity for us to build ties across the country. Again, speaking about how we can all cooperate together on our priority of creating jobs, and of course, specifically talking about projects like the Energy East pipeline and how we all have to work together to make sure that it becomes a reality.
Just to follow up on that, of course, the key provinces are Ontario and Quebec. Like, you're the bookends on this pipeline. It's the guys in the middle that have to have a say. So how do you do that? You're going to work together to try and pressure or encourage them to approve this?
Well, I mean, I think, one way of looking at it is, we can work together. We are sort of bookends. You can see Alberta as the push and New Brunswick as the pull in terms of getting that pipeline approved. And what we can do, there's a number of things that we can do. This meeting is about sort of coming up with just basically building relationships and ensuring that we can work more closely together in terms of doing exactly what you're talking about, which is going around Canada, to all parts of Canada, to talk about the benefits of this pipeline to not just Alberta and New Brunswick, but frankly to all Canadians, and to talk about the import of our energy industry to the Canadian economy, because quite frankly, it is very critical to the Canadian economy. So we can work together to do that, and that was what today was about, to talk about how we can strategize a little bit more on doing that. And then also another point that we discussed is that with the new federal government, I think it's likely the case that we'll see the First Ministers meeting with the Prime Minister and being able to play a greater role in the administration of our federation. And in that capacity, it's really important for us to build relationships with people and with jurisdictions where we share common interests. And certainly New Brunswick and Alberta do share common interests with respect to the Energy East pipeline. And so we've talked a bit about, how that will work. And so ultimately, we've got to talk to each other, and you're quite right. Then we got to, talk to the rest of Canada, and that's something that we are going to do. And as Premier Gallant has already very clearly laid out, one of the ways to ensure that our conversations are received respectfully is to do our homework on climate change.
Josh?
Just to focus on one aspect of the budget, simply put, how are you going to pay down the debt?
Well, we very clearly in the budget have outlined a plan to balance. And so as you know, we made a decision that we, in the face of massively dropping oil prices and a $6 billion drop in revenue in 1 year, that we were not going to further shock the economy and shock Albertans by making massive cuts. So we're doing two things. We've got a responsible plan to balance. We also have a responsible plan to bring costs under control, but not overnight. So for instance, the healthcare budget has grown by 6% every year for the last 8 years. And you will see in our budget a plan to very carefully drop down that rate of increase to 2%. Because the healthcare budget is such a large part of our budget, that's going to play a role. For instance, the previous budget that you saw introduced in March talked about cutting billions and billions of dollars from healthcare within the next 2 years without any plan to make it happen, which would have simply caused chaos and hurt Albertans. So we do have a plan to get there, but it does take longer because our view is that we need to do it responsibly and we have to maintain our role as the shock absorber.
To pay down debt, you need to
Balance the
lower
budget.
costs, make more money. How are you gonna do that?
I think that's laid out very clearly in the budget, as I just laid out. We have a plan to slowly drop the rate of increase, and meanwhile, we have very cautious projections with respect to revenue growth as well, both in terms of population and inflation, as well as a slow recovery in the price of oil. So those are the fundamental components. I think that's laid out fairly clearly. I think our projections are as conservative as can be anticipated, understanding, of course, that in Alberta, when you're projecting 5 years out, it's always a little bit of a mug's game the farther you get. But that's what Alberta governments have done for a long time. And as I've said before, we've got a boom and bust economy. We do not need to make it worse by having a boom and bust government.
We'll take a question from Tom, and then we'll go to the phone, and then come back to the floor.
Very glad it was almost exactly a year ago you met with then Premier Jim Prentice. I want to know the difference in tone between the two meetings, the difference of what was discussed at the two meetings. Was there something discussed this time that wasn't discussed this time last year?
Well, thank you for the question. Look, we obviously want to build relationships with the provinces, and we respect the choices that the people of those provinces make. They're always right. So for me, it was great to meet Premier Prentice. We had good conversations when I was here. But like I said, I think it's a real opportunity for us with Premier Notley, who clearly is going to make climate change a part of her government's agenda, to be able to move projects like the Energy East pipeline forward. We need to develop a strong brand and credibility here in Canada with all Canadians and with the international community if we're going to develop these types of projects. So we're very optimistic about the potential and the opportunity to work with Premier Notley, and of course all our counterparts across the country on projects like the Energy East pipeline, projects like the Canadian Energy Strategy, and certainly anything else that can help us create jobs and economic growth in our country.
I guess what I was asking is, did climate change even come up in last year's meeting? Was that part of the strategy?
I'm gonna have to get back. I'll have to go get my notes, to be honest. No, look, again, it was a great conversation with both premiers, and but I'm very excited moving forward with Premier Notley that the opportunity we have to work together on many fronts, and of course the Energy East pipeline being one of the more prevalent ones.
We're going to go to the phones now. Operator, can you put through the first caller?
Your next question comes from Rick Bell of Sunbeam Media. Your line is open.
Good morning, Premiers. A question to Premier Notley. In the budget on page 6 of the fiscal plan, it talks about you finding savings next year, $250 million, savings the year after, $300 million, to be identified from lower priority programs. Do you have any sense of where that's going to come from? And more importantly, where will the savings go? Are they going to go to reduce the bottom line number, or are they going to go to programs in other departments? And then I have a supplement.
Well, I believe that they are identified in the budget as going to the bottom line, and so they're anticipated. They're already booked as going towards the bottom line. It's not uncommon, typically, for governments to allow for in-year savings, particularly in our case because we've been in government for 5 months. It takes a little while to come up with the places where you can find savings that you're confident can be done without creating creating more problems. And so that's essentially what we've allowed for in the budget. And it's the kind of thing that will happen through careful analysis, consideration, deliberation by our cabinet before those cuts are made. You know, and then generally speaking, I mean, we've talked about, for instance, one place where we may see the capacity for some savings is the fact that our Finance Minister, Joe Ceci, will be leading a review of our agency boards and commissions. We have, well, if you combine them all together, we have over 300 agency boards and commissions, and some of them were created 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, and the mandate of them may or may not still be relevant to the objectives of the people of Alberta today. So we're going to do a very fulsome review of those agency boards and commissions and see if there's an opportunity there to merge organizations, leadership, mandates, and work plans, and so we may see some opportunity for some savings there.
Supplementary. It says in the budget there these are called program reallocations, so I'm a bit confused as to whether the $250 million in savings from next year are going to go to other places within the government, or whether they're just going to come right out of the government budget, and maybe you could clarify that. And number two, and what do you say to people, especially with almost daily news now of major job losses, who might want to see more spending restraint from the government, not cratering the healthcare system, not cratering the education system, not massive slash and burn axe-wielding cuts, but just more spending restraint within the government than is presently there? So those are two kind of questions, a clarification and then a question. Thank you very much.
Sure. So, well, thank you. I think I sort of answered the first supplementary question, but so let me start with the second one. I think, in fact, that our budget does include a plan for restraint. If you look at the rate of government spending increase over the last many years, this is actually a fairly cautious plan moving forward. For instance, healthcare takes up 40% of our budget, and it has increased by roughly 6% a year. And what we've talked about doing is slowly, over 4 years, moving that down to 2%, giving a lot of notice to providers and to HS that this is what they're going to have to manage. Meanwhile, we've got other ministries where they've been kept at zero. Which, when you take into account population and inflation, is itself restraint. So I think that we have actually injected a cautious level of restraint. What we have done as well, though, is we have created some new investments, and those new investments are actually about job creation. And those decisions were taken with the very people in mind that you described, Rick, taking into account the fact that the job losses that have occurred in Alberta up to now mean that families are worried about meeting their obligations by the end of each month. And we know that that's happening, and we know that communities are suffering as a result of that. And so that's why we have done as much as we think we reasonably can within the scope of our financial capacity to look at different ways to incent job creation, whether it be through the grant, whether it be through what I would suggest are some fairly creative new strategies to generate access to capital for small and medium enterprises, as well as our enhanced and accelerated capital expansion projects. So we hear what you're saying, and we hear what Albertans are talking about in terms of concerns about job loss, and we know that's important to focus on, and we think that we have struck the right balance in the budget between those concerns.
So there are a number of calls on the line. We're going to take a few more callers on the line, and then we're going to come back to the floor, but this is getting tight now, guys, so I'll try to fit you in if I can. Can we put it the next caller?
Your next question comes from Adam Huris of the New Brunswick Journal. Your line is open.
Thank you. Question to Premier Notley. Prime Minister-elect Justin Trudeau has said repeatedly that the Harper government politically torqued the National Energy Board process. I wanted to know if you agreed, and can a project like Energy East afford delays if Trudeau is to take the time to reform the NEB process?
Well, I think that there's no question that the economy of Canada needs for the Energy East project to move forward in a fairly expeditious way. That being said, I think that if we're going to earn the social license of all Canadians for this project, even those Canadians who will benefit economically from it, that we have to ensure that we've done our due diligence and done our homework, not only on the economic or not only on the environmental principles that Premier Gallant has already outlined, but also ensuring that we engage appropriately with First Nations and that we, give Canadians an opportunity to engage as well. So there's a balancing act there, absolutely. At the end of the day, I don't control the NEB process, and I think it needs to be not politically controlled. I think it needs to run its course, and it needs to earn and have the trust of Canadians. But I think that part of the way to ensure that can happen is that as a province, we can do better in terms of ensuring all Canadians that we are doing what we need to do on climate change as well as other environmental protection files.
Operator, can you put through the next caller?
Your next question comes from Don Braid of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Premier, how do you react to the fuss in Edmonton over the allegation that having elected all those NDP MLAs when Calgary didn't elect all that many, that Edmonton's getting stiffed on the funding front and Calgary's getting lavishly overfunded?
Well, I will say at the outset that policymaking ought not to be done on a Noah's Ark basis. I think that it should be done on the basis of need. That being said, our capital plan is probably one of the most important components of our capital plan is our proposition that going forward, that we're not going to announce projects simply because we have a hole in our communication schedule. We're going to announce projects when we've done our homework, done our due diligence, and have a plan in place so that the announcement means something. One of the things we discovered when we became government was that notwithstanding previous announcements in Edmonton by the previous government around the Royal Alec and other sites, that virtually no planning had taken place. So when it came to actually evaluating the merits of the projects and the scope of the projects, the planning had not really been completed. So that's why what you see in our budget is money for planning for major infrastructure evaluations in Edmonton, particularly in the healthcare sector. And you also see a pot of money, roughly $4.5 billion, which is not yet allocated, because we're not going to make up allocations based on what strikes us in the morning when we get up that we're kind of interested in. We're going to do it on the basis of sound planning. And so that $4.5 billion is set aside for us to engage in that. So what I would suggest then is that the conversation is not complete, but I would rather present a conversation in progress that is attached to reality and due diligence and homework than present something that looks done when it's not. And I wish there was more work done with respect to that planning, but certainly within our own, what we've been told is that it was nowhere nearly as far along as had been led to believe by the previous spate of press conferences.
We're going to take one last question from the phone, and then we have just time for one question on the floor, guys, so Darcy will ask the last question. Operator, can you put through the next caller?
Your next question comes from Matthew Wacomio of Acadie Nouvelle. Your line is open.
Bonjour, M. Gallant. L'Alberta a ce qu'on appelle une carbon levy, disons une cotisation sur le carbone pour les grands pollueurs. Elle a ça depuis des années. Est-ce que c'est quelque chose dont le Nouveau-Brunswick pourrait s'inspirer dans sa propre politique sur les changements climatiques? Est-ce qu'on pourrait avoir une carbon levy sur les grands pollueurs?
Ben, ça me ferait plaisir de répondre à votre question. La seule chose que je demande, c'est que vous mettez en contexte le fait que je vais dire que on va tout considérer. Alors, c'est pas juste qu'on considérait spécifiquement cela, on va tout considérer. Et qu'est-ce qu'on fait? On va autour du pays et on parle à d'autres provinces et territoires pour savoir comment que eux autres ils vont se prendre pour combattre le changement climatique. Évidemment, on veut avoir les meilleures pratiques des autres provinces pour être capable d'informer qu'est-ce que nous, on va faire au Nouveau-Brunswick. Comme vous le savez, Mathieu, nous, on a mis très clair que nous allons prendre le plan du dernier gouvernement qui a été fait en juin 2014 et nous allons ajouter à ce plan. Comme vous le savez aussi, nous avons joint les provinces de l'Est du Canada et les États de la Nouvelle-Angleterre pour signer une entente que nous allons travailler ensemble comme région pour réduire les gaz à effet de serre, que ça soit des réductions de 35 à 45 sous les niveaux de 1990 par l'année 2030. Alors, nous avons bien sûr mis très clair notre vouloir de travailler sur le changement climatique et jouer notre rôle comme province pour aider le pays avec ce sujet très important. Alors, tout sera considéré et bien sûr, nous allons sortir notre mise à jour du plan bientôt.
Darcy, last question.
Premier Notley, in Tuesday's budget, you pledged to mobilize $2.1 billion through AEC and ATB and AIMCO for investment. How do you assure Albertans that money won't be squandered, that it won't go to bad loans and boondoggles that we've seen in the past?
My primary assurance is that in both cases, ATB and AIMCO have outstanding records with respect to the financial decisions that they have made with respect to their investments, and have faith in leadership of those organizations. And so, and the same with AEC. And we are not going to be involved in that decision-making process. We have, with ATB, all we've done is we've given them the ability to loan more, which we have to do by the government is in charge of how much they can loan. And with AIMCO, all we've asked is that they focus more on Alberta based businesses. But we will not be involved in the decision-making. It will be completely done by professional investment consultants or investment analysts who will make the best decision under the overarching obligation to maintain the rate of return that they have for those organizations. So they will continue to be driven by their organizational obligation to enhance and protect their rate of return. We've just asked them to look at these other areas, but they'll be the ones making the decisions. It won't be a question of meetings with the cabinet talking about certain projects where we're suddenly, none of that kind of stuff. This is, the institutions themselves will be leading this. And they came to us and said, we think we can do more.
If they can loan more, though, doesn't that raise the risk of them giving out more bad loans?
Well, I mean, I suppose that would be the case for every financial institution that can loan more. But typically, that's how business development works. And generally speaking, financial institutions that are in the business of loaning money do it under the overarching principle that they need to maximize returns for their investors, and that will continue to be the same for both AIMCO as well as ATB. It's just a question of looking at certain areas that have not been previously as easily funded. So I believe that at the end of the day, these decisions will be made carefully and cautiously.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Are you going to Paris? Are you going to Paris?